Famous people who passed away in 1753. Before we proceed, please subscribe to our channel to support us. Sir Hans Sloane. He was born in April 1660 and he died in January 1753. His age was 92 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was paralysis. He was an Anglo-Irish physician, naturalist, and collector. He had a collection of 71,000 items, which he bequeathed to the British nation, thus providing the foundation of the British Museum, the British Library, and the Natural History Museum, London. His vast collection of artifacts formed the foundation of the British Museum. Elected to the Royal Society at the age of 24, Sloane traveled to the Caribbean in 1687 and documented his travels and findings with extensive publications years later. George Berkeley. He was born in March 1685 and he died in January 1753. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Anglo-Irish philosopher whose primary achievement was advancement of a theory he called immaterialism. This theory denies the existence of material substance and instead contends that familiar objects like tables and chairs are ideas perceived by the mind and as a result cannot exist without being perceived. He is also known for his critique of abstraction, an important premise in his argument for immaterialism. Archibald Cameron of Locheil. He was born in February 1707 and he died in June 1753. His age was 46 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was execution for treason. He was a Scottish Jacobite leader and physician. He was executed for his role in supporting in 1745 Jacobite uprising against British government. He was a nobleman, physician, and a prominent leader. He was personal physician to Charles Edward Stuart and appears in the Jacobite army muster role as ADC to the prince. After returning to Scotland in 1753, he was captured by the government and was executed for high treason, being the last Jacobite to be executed. Georg Wilhelm Richmann. He was born in July 1711 and he died in August 1753. His age was 42 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was an accident. He was a physicist who died in a lightning experiment while conducting groundbreaking research on electricity. He was a Russian physicist of Baltic German origin who did pioneering work on electricity, atmospheric electricity, and calorimetry. He died by electrocution in St. Petersburg when struck by apparent ball lightning produced by an experiment attempting to ground the electrical discharge from a storm. He became famous for establishing the first general equation for calorimetric calculations. This law was later called Richmann's law in his honor. Sir Danvers Osborn, 3rd Baronet. He was born in November 1715 and he died in October 1753. His age was 37 at the time of his death, and he took his own life. He was a British colonial administrator who briefly served as the governor of New York before his untimely death. He served briefly in 1753 as colonial governor of New York province. During the Jacobite Rising of 1745, he had raised and commanded troops in support of King George II of Great Britain. Osborn later served as a member of Parliament for Bedfordshire. In 1750, he travelled to Nova Scotia and was part of Nova Scotia Council. He had a history of melancholia and took his own life in New York shortly after he had taken office. Louise Benedicte de Bourbon. She was born in November 1676 and she died in January 1753. Her age was 76 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a French noblewoman and patron of the arts. Louise supported many writers and artists during her lifetime. She was the daughter of Henry Jules de Bourbon, Prince of Condé, and Anne Henriette of Bavaria. As a member of the reigning house of Bourbon, she was a princess du sang, forced to marry the Duke of Maine, legitimate son of Louis XIV. She reveled in politics and the arts and held popular saloon at the Hôtel du Maine as well as the Château de Sceaux. Giacomo Facco. He was born in February 1676 and he died in February 1753. His age was 77 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Italian composer known for his operas and instrumental works, contributing significantly to the Baroque musical tradition. He was a Baroque violinist, conductor, and composer, one of the most famous Italian composers of his day. He was completely forgotten until 1962, when his works were discovered by composer, conductor, and musicologist Umberto Zanoli. Facco fell victim of his scheming colleagues. He slowly lost all of his possessions until in the last years of his life. He was merely a violinist in the orchestra of Royal Chapel. Eleonore of Lowenstein, Wertheim. She was born in February 1686 and she died in February 1753. Her age was 67 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a German noblewoman, celebrated for her philanthropic and cultural contributions, particularly within the Catholic Church. She was a princess of Lowenstein, Wertheim, Rochefort. She was the Landgravine of Hesse-Rotenburg by marriage. Baptized as Eleanor Maria Anna, she was known as Eleanor. Her father had entered imperial service at a young age, was an imperial counselor from 1684, thus her birth in Vienna, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, then ruled by Leopold I. Franciszka Urszula Radziwill. She was born in February 1705 and she died in May 1753. Her age was 48 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a Polish-Lithuanian playwright and poet who pioneered in early Baroque drama and literature in Eastern Europe. She was a Polish writer and playwright and the first female writer on territory of modern Poland and Belarus. She was princess and the last female representative of the Vaishnav noble house. The work of Franciszka can be divided into two parts. The first in bilingual and genres, mainly poetic and epistolary, the most fruitful period of dramatic art and theatre activities in Nashville during 1746 and 1752. Richard Boyle, 3rd Earl of Burlington. He was born in April 1694 and he died in December 1753. His age was 59 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English architect and nobleman. He was a leading figure in introducing Palladian architecture style to Britain. He was a British architect and noble, often called Apollo of the Arts, and the architect Earl, the son of the 2nd Earl of Burlington and 3rd Earl of Cork. Burlington never took more than a passing interest in politics despite his position as a Privy Councillor and a member of both British House of Lords and the Irish House of Lords. His great interests in life were architecture and landscaping. He is remembered for being a builder and a patron of architects, craftsmen, and landscapers. Joachim Ludwig Schultheiss von Antritt. He was born in 1678 and he died in June 1753. His age was 75 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Prussian architect, known for designing notable places and fortifications in Eastern Europe during the Baroque period. He was a German Baroque architect, official, and counselor, most active in Königsberg and throughout East Prussia. He became the most important architectural official in East Prussia and a member of the Kriegs-und-Domänenkammer after the king's reorganization of government in 1723. He designed or altered the layouts of numerous Eastern Prussian towns. Charlotta Elisabeth van der Lith. She was born in November 1700 and she died in August 1753. Her age was 52 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a Dutch noblewoman who supported education initiatives and helped improve social welfare systems in her community. She was a plantation owner in Dutch Suriname, married to 3 governors in 1724 to 1737, and the leader of the opposition party of the settlers. Cabell. Lith became a successful planter through the plantation she inherited from her father. She remained in the governor's residence after the death of her first 2 spouses and every time married the new governor upon his arrival. From 1742, she acted as a leader of Cabell party, created by the Dutch colonist Balthasar Neumann. He was born in January 1687 and he died in August 1753. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German Baroque architect, renowned for his masterpiece, the Wurzburg residence, and numerous church designs. He was a German architect and military artillery engineer who developed a refined brand of Baroque architecture, fusing Austrian, Bohemian, Italian, and French elements to design some of the most impressive buildings of the period, including Wurzburg residence and the Basilica of the 14 Holy Helpers. The Wurzburg residence is considered one of the most beautiful and well-proportioned places in Europe, and Basilica of the 14 Holy Helpers is considered by some as the crowning work of the period. Johann Georg Weishaupt. He was born in April 1717 and he died in September 1753. His age was 36 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German professor of law at the University of Ingolstadt. He received a doctorate in law in 1743 and began to teach at the university. He also moved to Wurzburg to the University of Ingolstadt. Ingolstadt had him appointed professor of imperial institutions and criminal law by decree of 14th October 1746. He held this position until his death. One of his pupils was future historian Johann Georg von Lory, who wrote a doctorate in the University of Ingolstadt in 1748. Margareta von Ascheberg. She was born in July 1671 and she died in October 1753. Her age was 82 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a Swedish noblewoman and military leader who defended Swedish territories. She was a Swedish landowner, noble, and acting regiment colonel during the Great Northern Wars. She was accompanied by her spouse on his military commissions. During the war, she took care of the continued equipment and affairs of the regiment and exchanged letters with Charles XII of Sweden about its appointments and promotions. She was called Coloneless or Madame Colonel. She was admired for the energy and care with which she performed her unusual tasks. Charles August, Prince of Nassau-Weilburg. He was born in September 1685 and he died in November 1753. His age was 68 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German prince, remembered for implementing social and administrative reforms in Nassau-Weilburg. He was from 1719 to 1753 Prince of Nassau. In his youth, he worked as a diplomat for Saxony. For a while, he was the Saxon ambassador in Paris. He succeeded his father as Prince of Weilburg on 27 February 1719. In 1733 and 1734, he commanded the imperial troops on the Rhine as an imperial cavalry general. In 1737, he assumed the title of prince, which family had been awarded in 1688. Bertrand-Francois Mahe de la Bourdonnais. He was born in February 1699 and he died in November 1753. His age was 54 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French naval officer and colonial administrator who contributed to the development of Mauritius and its defenses. He entered the service of the French East India Company as a lieutenant, and in 1724 he was promoted to captain and displayed such bravery in the capture of Mahe on the Malabar coast that the name of the town was added to his own, although an alternative account suggests that the town adopted his name rather than the other way around. Samuel-Jacques Bernard. He was born in May 1686 and he died in November 1753. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French banker who provided crucial financial support to the French monarchy during the early 18th century. He was the son of financier Samuel Bernard, a rich noble in France, and the first wife, Anne Magdalene Clergeot. He was superintendent of finance for Queen Maria from 1725, a maître de regat, conseiller du roi, grand croix, and master of the ceremonies of the Order of St. Louis. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Have a nice day.